Hello and welcome back to ADIPEC Energy Dialogues, a series of conversations we're bringing you in the run-up to ADIPEC 2020 taking place this November in Abu Dhabi. And this is a series of conversations with industry analysts, experts, and market participants on the impacts of digital innovation on the global oil and gas industry. And today, I'm just delighted to be joined by Ramy Eid, head of E&P Digital Portfolio for Repsol. Ramy began his career in the Middle East in the field, has spent time in Texas, in the Thai offshore, in North Africa, and is presently based with Repsol in Madrid. His work has included drillings and completions R&D, and over the past year, he's been focused on the application of digital in the role of this global portfolio lead. Ramy, welcome to Energy Dialogues.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now let's begin with the current state of readiness for digital innovation and adoption in oil and gas. What is your assessment of the state of readiness for the industry at this time of the cycle?
You know, if you would have asked me that question about a year ago, I would have probably given it about a 6 out of 10. We were moving in the right direction. We were monitoring, but we were doing it a little bit slowly. We were not all sold on the transformation, whether it's up the ladder or down the chain. And we also didn't all understand the need to change so fast. It was all complex implementation, tough softwares that we didn't understand. The overheads were unaccounted for. But given the recent events that have just been taken over, I'd say that the industry has gotten a big nudge. Everyone's been engaged. Everyone's on board. The message is clear, and the mindset is generally there. Everyone's building up, and I potentially say that now we're easily at an 8 out of 10 just over this last year, a nice jump.
Now, you mentioned the message is now clear. What is the message that the industry has taken on board?
Well, at the moment, the transformation is happening. So the industry is adapting and changing towards this transformation. Digitalization is a big part of this transformation. And we, as an industry, we're trying to embrace all of the impacts and all of the changes and adopting towards that change.
And have any parts of the industry been more impacted than others at this stage? And here I'm thinking, I mean, your area of focus is in the exploration and production area, but the industry is long and involved, midstream, downstream, trading, capital projects. Has any part of the industry demonstrated any leadership or step out in dealing with digital innovation at this point?
Well, as you say, the industry is pretty large. It's a complex industry. With relation to the sectors in division, I would say the upstream is probably taking the lead on digitalization and innovation. Also, I would say that is sort of related. I would put it in relative terms because upstream is the biggest spender. So the biggest impacts are put, towards the biggest spending. You're right, midstream is potentially in the equation, a little bit behind on the equation on that. Downstream is a little bit more organized, so they have what they need. They're fixed refineries, but they understand the implementation and the moving forward relates to digitalization. In my opinion, where the impact is basically going to be mostly impacted is going to be in where we see the dollar changes. So where the industry, or if your business is heavy capex, so where we have a lot of moving parts, this is where you're going to see the biggest impacts. And this is the immediate impacts that we're seeing right now.
A lot of capital in oil and gas, of course, is tied up in what I would characterize as quite mature facilities. Offshore drilling rigs, for example, and offshore platforms, many of which predate the internet age, let alone digital. How is the digital innovation impacting these older platforms, and are they in a good position to take advantage of the possibilities presented by digital change?
That's a very good question. It's actually been a debate in some of the other conferences that I've been attending recently. There's two sides of the coin. One says to be left alone and just monitor by afar, just to sort of live out its life. and the other says it's worth investing to be able to prolong its life and give us the more. To be honest, I'm on both sides. It's applicable to the specific scenario, but within the E&P sector, I see a lot of focus on the P&A, the plug and abandonment sector, and the decommissioning space. So we can sort of argue that digitalization has improved and enhanced the way we've dealt with decom projects and plug and abandonment projects. And I think not only by saving time, but cost, and also impacting safety as well. But overall, I think you're right. A plan B is needed related to some of these older infrastructures. And it's gonna be needing some time to look into it.
One of the areas of the offshore, offshore in particular, where digital innovation could actually have an impact relates to the movement of vessels, the orchestration of the supply chain, the bringing of resources from field to shore and back out to field. What's your perspective of this part of the industry? Is it more of a logistics arena than it is an oil and gas arena when you think about it? Is it amenable to digital change, or is it already sufficiently sophisticated in that regard?
It's a very good point. Supply chain and logistics in general in our industry is a very complex sector. A lot of moving parts, a lot of trucking, a lot of invoicing, a lot of monitoring. At this point, I think within the supply chain, there's a lot of focus. A lot of the operators and the oil and gas companies are focusing within the supply chain world and the logistics world. And I think that's where the biggest bang for your buck is going to be hit at this moment, focusing on digitalizing and improving the efficiency of your supply chain and logistics.
Now, there's a lot of technologies that fall into this bucket of digital technologies, everything from sophisticated Internet of Things, cloud computing technologies, voice technologies. Of the hundreds that are out there, is there a set or a small number that continues to crop up as being the components of a digital transformation agenda?
I personally believe that if everyone focuses on their specific case, it would be a lot better than following the trend of picking one of the hundreds, as you say, or thousands of initiatives and tools that are coming up right now. It's tough to say. I say, like I said earlier, if you're a CapEx intensive organization, there will be hundreds of technologies available that would be able to assist you. However, in the long term, I would see that there's going to be a strong focus on emission monitoring and basically carbon footprint reduction. So, you know, the flip side of the hundreds of technologies is that we have to watch out what's viable and what's not. Data is key to any digital transformation. And, you know, we have a saying, garbage in is garbage out.
Well, it makes complete sense that given the pressures in the world on climate change, just this week, China's announced a shift in policy direction to aim for peak CO2 emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. The EU has already made clear statements about being carbon neutral by 2050. So sounds like technologies that enable oil and gas concerns to detect, measure, monitor their carbon footprint would be a priority area, would it not?
Yes, absolutely. At this point, all oil and gas companies are changing their direction. And this is where I believe the industry is transforming into the next era. And part of it is this speed bump that we're facing with relation to emission and carbon footprint. Every one of us has announced that within a certain time frame, we will be neutral or zero.
Well, you mentioned the current situation we're in, obviously you're referring to the pandemic, has given a big nudge to the adoption and acceleration of digital innovation in oil and gas. Beyond the sudden transition we're all into being really many of us home workers, to what extent has the global pandemic altered the adoption of digital technologies in the industry? And if you kind of cast your mind forward, where do you see the potential? What comes next?
You know, in all honesty, I think COVID, obviously, it's a disaster. It's something that everyone's working through. There have been countries and companies that have been impacted in a very, very harsh way. But I personally believe that this opportunity, we took this as an opportunity to be able to transition through. I would say that most CEOs around now are saying that they have publicly admitted that COVID was one of that nudge that they needed to move to the next angle. The one thing I believe that this pandemic has created is it's created an awareness that this is happening. It's clear, it's happening. Everyone's on board, as I mentioned earlier. So what other changes are potentially possible in the future? Due to the fact that everyone's thinking that this is happening, in my opinion, just at the top of my head, I'm thinking better sensors are potentially needed to be able to manage better data, filter through them. We're probably going to be resorting to voice activation more. And, you know, at this specific type of day, I think with my personal interest, blockchain is a very, very late entry to the game of oil and gas, and we need to start including it. So having awareness is a good idea to be able to start making the flow go and the train move.
Just referring back to blockchain, can you elaborate a little bit? Where is the play here that that blockchain allows? Does it, for instance, create a more touchless society, a higher a society or business processes that have less variability in them because of the potential of blockchain to, say, improve trust or transparency?
Just the fact that blockchain runs over what we call the distributed ledgers, they're monitored. This is something that we don't have in the oil and gas industry. Whether we're operators or vendors, we're sort of operating in silos. Blockchain by itself allows us to unite and communicate. When the edge of the finance and related to invoicing, this is a complete and utter impact. And blockchain is a world that we're still not aware of how to onboard it yet, but it's happening. There's many consortiums and many discussions going on with plenty of oil and gas operators right now.
With this tremendous wave of digital adoption that's coming at the industry, there's clearly going to be impacts on talent. And that's everything from the nature of skills required, the roles that people will play. How do you see the talent model of the oil and gas industry shifting as a result of the adoption of digital innovations?
I think that's a very good question. I see there's a lot of concern from the folks in the field and from the new talent that's graduating about the fact that the industry is dying. I completely disagree with that. I believe the industry is changing and it's adapting. And I believe change and adaptation only leads to more opportunities, not less. You have other industries such as the F&B, the bio, the techs that have changed and adapted and increased their talent. A colleague of mine once told me that if we make an efficiency of the time, the man hours of an employee by implementing digital innovations, down the line, this employee will run out of a job. I disagree. What digital does, it actually removes some of the redundant tasks to be able to free up this employee to be able to be more innovative and useful. I believe at this point, jobs will not reduce. I think they will change. We're going to be needing more IT folks, more coders. The oil and gas industry is going to be changing, but we're never going to give up the basic need for the operator, the geologist, the driller. That's not going to go away.
Now, digital innovations also introduce all kinds of new risks. And here I'm thinking about as we create a bigger digital landscape, cyber risks go up. Are there other risks that are uppermost in your mind, new risks that the oil and gas industry will need to be attentive to?
Yes, that's a good question. We've discussed some of them today, like the older structures, as you mentioned. These are some risks that we have to look into. Some and most of us follow trends rather than needs. Data accuracy and validity, that's a risk. There's much more. One thing I have to say is the industry has always been reluctant to fail. This is a multi-million-dollar per job industry. So there's lives at risk, there's environments at risk, the bottom line's at risk. So we've always approached new technology with a grain of salt. And digitalization isn't just new, it's a complete shift in mentality. But it's happening. And I'm glad that the oil and gas industry has embraced this shift. So I believe at the end of the day, the risks might be there in the beginning, but it's just speed bumps for me. I think they're all mitigatable.
Ramy, any closing thoughts to share on digital innovation in oil and gas?
Yeah, I think we're in a great space. I think we're in a great time. I think this is the time where innovators are shining. The one thing we have to do is I urge all oil and gas operators and vendors to own this transformation and not just sponsor it or talk about it. You need to own this transformation because it's important that it's all in the mind. Once we get it right, it's going to be perfect.
Ramy, thanks very much for joining me today on Energy Dialogues.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Energy Dialogues for ADIPEC, and tune in again for future episodes. And we'll hopefully see you at ADIPEC this year in November. Bye for now.